Thank you for that special. That was very good. We've my wife and I like to travel a lot, so we've been in a lot of churches, heard a lot of different music programs from different churches, and I have to tell you the music here has been phenomenal. We have really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the congregational singing, enjoyed the special music at the choir. It's all been really good. I'll be turning to Habakkuk chapter number 3. Habakkuk chapter number 3. That's toward the end of the Old Testament. And Pastor, you mentioned introducing myself, and you said that again in the Sunday school this morning, and I'm just not very good at introducing myself. My name is Bill Fortenberry. My wife Jessica is down here. We have a son who's 18. He's in Bible college right now in Shelby, North Carolina, studying youth ministries and music. So we're empty nesters, finally. And we were in the ministry for couple of years right after graduating from Bible college ourselves, and God kind of closed the door through different situations. We didn't want to step aside and go into business, but God kind of led that way and forced us, and it was very clear. And we've been kind of stubbornly trying to get back into ministry the entire time, keep trying to push our way in. The door's always locked. And about a year ago, things started changing around, and over the past couple of months, things really started changing. And we've been trying that knob that's been locked on ministry. We've been trying that knob on that door, and now all of a sudden the door's flung wide open, and all kinds of opportunities have opened up, and we're just excited about what God's been working for in our lives, and then excited about the future wherever He has us going to serve Him. We have no clue where He's going to lead us. We're just out looking at all the different opportunities to see what God leads. But Habakkuk chapter 3, hopefully you've found your place there by now with all my rambling. We're going to start in verse number 17. I'm going to bring a message called Rejoicing in Time of Trouble. And this is a message that my wife wrote for me back when I was in college. And it's kind of halfway true there. I was sitting down with her. I was going to have to preach that Sunday, and I was sitting down with her while we were dating, and said, I have no clue what to preach. And she said, why don't you preach out of Habakkuk 3, 17 through 19? I said, well, I don't even know what that says. So I opened my Bible and looked at it and said, well, hey, that's a great message there. And so she ended up encouraging me to write this message. So I wrote it all the way back then, 20-something years ago in college. Preached it several times since then. I go back and review it in my own life because it's just such a great message and a great thought that God gives us here in the book of Habakkuk. Very encouraging. And I just want to look at how we can rejoice in time of trouble. Look at verse number 17. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and He will make my feet like hinds' feet, and He will make me to walk upon mine high places, to the chief singer upon my stringed instruments. And we're not so much of an agrarian society anymore in America. So we have all of our factories, and very few of us actually survive based off of how well the farms perform in our country. But in Israel at this time, they were an agrarian economy. So if the farms were doing well, the nation was prosperous. If the farms were not doing well, the nation starved. And so what Habakkuk is describing here in verse 17 is a time of total economic collapse. So the nation of Judah is about to go through a complete and total collapse of their economy. Their fruit trees have failed to even produce flowers. And of course, you can't have fruit without the flower. And so they haven't produced even flowers, so they're not going to have any fruit. The vines have not produced any grapes. They harvested olives, but then something happened between the time of the harvest of the olives and the time of pressing the olives to get the oil, so that they weren't able to get any oil out of it. And we don't know if it was from robbers coming in and stealing it, from fires or whatever. Something happened to prevent the olives from producing any oil. Their fields are completely barren. There's no wheat for making bread, and all of their livestock has been stolen. So they're facing starvation and death on a national scale. I mean, this is a terrible, time in the nation of Judah. And yet, Hezekiah opens up verse 18, yet will I rejoice in the Lord. I mean, you have to think, what is wrong with this guy? I mean, everything's about to fall apart. They're all about to die. And he says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. And so, instead of thinking, what's wrong with him, maybe we should think, what's right with this guy? What does this guy see that the rest of his nation did not see? How is he able to look at this economic collapse and the death of thousands of his fellow citizens and still respond with rejoicing? So to see that, we're going to start all the way back at the beginning of the book, and we're going to go through the entire book of Habakkuk. And I know we've got ice cream waiting, so I'm not going to go too slow through this. We're going to try to go quick. And it's only 3 chapters. So Habakkuk chapter 1. We're going to look at a couple things. First of all, we're going to look at the nation. So first of all, looking at the nation, and a little bit of a background story here. With the nation, we have first a wicked ruler. And this is not in Habakkuk, but if you wanted to study what was going on at this time, this is during the reign of Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim was a foolish king who taxed the nation into poverty. They were prosperous before. He came in, increased the taxes exorbitantly just for his personal selfishness, and taxed the nation into poverty. So that's who's reigning at this time. Jehoiakim was also one of the most wicked rulers in the history of Judah. He was so wicked that God personally cursed him and commanded that his name be removed from the genealogies. Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 29, verse 30, God says, write ye this man childless. And so he already had a son, and so what the Jews did is they took his son and wrote in their genealogies that his son was the son of his dad. And so it skips him in the genealogies. If you read in the book of Matthew, the genealogies don't match up in Matthew versus the genealogies written before this time. In Matthew, the genealogy reads from Josiah to Jeconiah. And in the genealogies before, it read from Josiah, Jehoiakim, and then Jeconiah. And so God had him completely taken out. And we can see that they say, people read the book of Matthew and say, oh, it's an error that Matthew forgot a name. It wasn't an error. God commanded them to take him out of the genealogy. That's how bad this king was. He was so bad that in Jeremiah, God also said that he was going to be buried like the carcass of an animal. No one's going to mourn for him. When he died, they just took his body and kind of tossed it into a ditch. I mean, he's the king. and they just tossed his body in a ditch and let it rot. And didn't care at all that he was gone, rejoiced, in fact, that he was gone and they were no longer under his rule. That's who was ruling when Habakkuk wrote this. So that's the time period, that's the nation. He was under a very wicked ruler. As a result of that, we see the next point that in this nation, the nation was a land of violence and strife. And we can pick that up here in verse number 1. The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. And so Habakkuk begins this book commenting on the condition of Judah under the reign of Jehoiakim. And he saw Judah as a land of great violence, a land of iniquity. Jehoiakim's taxes had driven the people into a time of constant internal strife. When people are starving, they're going to steal from each other. They're going to steal, of course, the people they're being stolen from aren't going to like that. They're going to fight back, and so you have wars, you have fighting, you have people being killed, all because they're being starved by their government. Jehoiakim was so focused on money that he had completely abandoned his responsibility to enforce the rule of law. And so the judges weren't out prosecuting criminals anymore. So the criminals thought, hey, this is a heyday. We can just do whatever we want because there's no punishment for it. Crimes were never punished, wickedness increased, and Habakkuk probably felt like he was the only righteous man left in the nation. We've seen that in many of the other prophets. Jeremiah thought the same thing. Elijah thought the same thing. these prophets thinking, hey, I'm the only one. They get depressed. It's probably what Habakkuk was feeling when he started writing this book. Very, very down, very depressed, very dark outlook on the nation. And then that's when Habakkuk received a prophecy from God. And so let's look at the prophecy next. We'll start with Habakkuk's expectation. Imagine how he felt. He's really dark and depressed. He has a terrible outlook on the future of the nation. And now all of a sudden he hears from God. What is he going to expect when he hears from God? Look at verse number 2 again. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? So he's been crying out, probably for a long time. He's been crying out for God, crying out for God, crying out for God, on his knees, day in, day out, begging God to save his nation, send a revival, do something to prevent what he sees is coming. And then after all that time of crying out and begging God to do something, God appeared to him, physically appeared to him in answer to his prayer, and starts talking and giving a prophecy to Habakkuk. I don't know about you, I would have been ecstatic. I mean, I would have been jumping up and down. Yes, God has finally heard me. God is answering my prayer. We're finally going to get this relief I've been praying for. Look at verse number 5. This is what God says. God says, behold ye among the heathen, and regard, and wonder marvelously. For I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. All right, so think of what Habakkuk must be going through when he hears this. So he's been praying all this time, God, send a revival, God, save our nation, and he hears, hey, God telling to the heathen, so telling the other nations, all right, all you other nations, pay attention, I'm about to do something great in Judah. And I can imagine Habakkuk, if he was as fleshly as me, as carnal as me, he would probably have said, that's right, pay attention, you bunch of heathens. God's about to show you something. That's how I would have responded. Habakkuk may have been a little more spiritual, but he's got to be happy. When God starts talking, God says to all the other nations, pay attention, we're going to do something great in Judah. But now let's look at what God's message actually was. Pick it up in verse number 6. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation which shall march through the breadth of the land, to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards, and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far, and they shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. They shall come all for violence. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn unto them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust up and take it. So now imagine what Habakkuk has to be feeling. He's on this high. God's responding to him. God's saying all the nations need to pay attention to Judah. He's going to work this great work. And so Habakkuk's elated. He's excited. And then he finds out what great work God's going to do. That great work is going to be the destruction and captivity of Judah by the Babylonian Empire. I mean, he's got to be thinking pretty poorly now. I mean, he's real up on this huge high, and then all of a sudden he's all the way down in the depths again, probably a little bit deeper down in the depths than he was before, knowing that his nation that he's been praying for all these years is about to be completely destroyed. I mean, imagine how we would feel with America. We've been praying for America for all our lives, praying that God would send a revival to America, and then all of a sudden God comes and says, nope, I'm just going to destroy America. I'm done with her. That's basically what he told Habakkuk here. But let's look at Habakkuk's response. Pick it up in verse number 12, and he begins with a foolish rebuke of God. Verse number 12 says, Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God? So this is Habakkuk replying back to God. And you can hear a little bit of an anger in his words. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, mine Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, thou hast ordained them for judgment. He's talking about the Babylonians. Thou hast ordained them for judgment. And Almighty God, thou hast established them for correction. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue, when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he? and makest men as the fishes of the sea and as the creeping things that have no ruler over them. They take up all of them with the angle, they catch them in their net and gather them in their drag. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice unto their net and burn incense unto their drag, because by them their portion is fat and their meat plenteous. Shall they therefore empty their net and not spare continually to slay the nations? And so Habakkuk has a bit of a rebuke against God. He says, God, you're not supposed to do this. This is not how you're supposed to respond when your people pray. You're not supposed to respond with judgment and condemnation. You're supposed to destroy the wicked, not destroy the righteous, although I don't know if he could call Judah righteous at the time. But you're supposed to destroy them. They're more wicked than we are, at least. And so they're the ones that are supposed to be destroyed. It reminds me of someone else that rebuked the Lord. Matthew chapter 16, Peter rebuked Jesus. Jesus started telling the disciples, I'm going to go to the cross, I'm going to be killed. And Peter said, no, Lord. That's not what's going to happen. Do you remember Jesus' response to him? He said, get thee behind me, Satan. He called Peter Satan because Peter was telling God no. And Habakkuk is doing the same thing here. He's got a bit of a foolish response, but God has a softer answer to Habakkuk than Jesus had to Peter. Different situations here, but Habakkuk, after his response, after his rebuke, he kind of realized, I put my foot in my mouth. I shouldn't have gone quite that far in my response to God. And look at chapter 2, and we see the next thing about his response, that we see a silent defiance. Chapter 2, verse 1, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And so Habakkuk clearly knew that he was wrong. He knew, I shouldn't have said that, but he didn't apologize. He didn't say, forgive me, Lord, I shouldn't have said that. He said, okay, Lord, I know you're going to reprove me. I know you're going to rebuke me. I still think I'm right. And so I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to wait and see what you say, but I really think I'm right, and I think that you've got it wrong, God. So that's kind of where Habakkuk is. I was thinking maybe, surely it's wrong to reply this way, but maybe God had made a mistake. Maybe God will change his mind and say something different. Maybe he's just testing me. And so, I'll sit here and wait and see what he says, and I'll just take my rebuke if I get it. And then we see God's reply. In Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2 through 4, God had a compassionate reply to Habakkuk, offering, first of all, comforting reassurance. Habakkuk 2, verse 2 through 4 says, And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision, and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. And if you're familiar with Martin Luther, that was the verse that led Martin Luther to abandon the teachings of the Catholic Church and nail the 99 Thesis on the door and start the Protestant Reformation. It was the just shall live by his faith. That verse comes from Habakkuk. Excuse me. God did not rebuke Habakkuk. There's nothing in here of a rebuke. Like Jesus rebuking Peter saying, Get thee behind me, Satan. There's no rebuke. God just moved right on, as if Habakkuk had never even questioned him. He just moved right on into the next part. Now, there's going to be a soft rebuke in a minute, but there's not that harsh rebuke that Jesus had for Peter. And he tells Habakkuk instead that justice is going to prevail in the end. And if we read all of chapter 2, we're not going to take the time to go through all of it, but read it on your own, read chapter 2. It's about the destruction, the eventual destruction of Babylon. And so God is saying, yes, Babylon's going to come in, they're going to destroy Judah, but it's okay. In the end, good will triumph. Evil's going to come to the fore for a little time, but eventually they're going to pay for what they do. And the people are going to return to the land. We're going to have a revival eventually later on down the road. It's just going to be hard right now, but the righteous, they will live by their faith. Verse number 14, God promised that he would win in the end when he said, For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And this is kind of like the phrase, is water wet? If someone asks you, hey, I don't know, the Bears going to win the Super Bowl, and they reply back, well, is water wet? It's that type of a thing. Well, water is wet. I mean, as he said, as the waters cover the sea, is there water in the ocean? Yes. Well, just as surely as there is water in the ocean, that's how surely we know that eventually the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. So he's telling Habakkuk, that eventually everything is going to work out all right. Good will triumph in the end. You just have to endure for a season. Verse number 20 again says the same thing, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Okay, so God is in his holy temple. He's the one that's in control. Even though the wicked may come to the forefront for a little while, God is still in control. Just sit back and wait. And then we have a passive rebuke of Habakkuk right there at the end of verse 20. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Well, who's speaking right now? It's not the rest of the earth. It's Habakkuk. And God kind of passively says, everyone on earth needs to be quiet in front of me, and that includes you, Habakkuk. And so he didn't quite say, shut up, sit down, remember your place, but that's basically what was implied there. Habakkuk, you just need to remember God's in control, you be quiet, and you watch and let see what the Lord will do. Kind of like Moses when they were crossing the Red Sea, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Instead of all the people worrying about the Egyptian army behind them, they're all freaking out that they're going to die. Oh, woe is us. You brought us out here just so they can kill us. And he says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And so that's the same thing that God is saying to Habakkuk, just very softly, phrasing it kind of passively instead of directly at him. And I imagine it's probably because of God's compassion, that Habakkuk's been crying out this whole long time, and God understands, as it says later, he knoweth our frame, that we are but dust. He knows that Habakkuk he wasn't being rebellious and rebuking God. It was just his passion got the better of him. And he recognized that Habakkuk wouldn't normally have just responded angrily like that. And so his rebuke was also tempered with compassion. And that brings us to chapter 3. And chapter 3, the very first verse says, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet upon Shigionoth. And so this is Habakkuk's prayer. And so after all this has taken place, after he's cried out all this time, after he's heard from God and got excited and elated, and then his hopes are dashed because God says that he's going to destroy the nation. After all that, and then God comes and tells him, hey, actually the nation's going to be destroyed, but don't worry, I'm still in control, righteousness will triumph. After all that, Habakkuk now replies. And he begins with an apology. He apologized for his rash response, and he admitted that he had spoken out of fear instead of faith. Verse number 2 says, O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. So I heard thy speech and was afraid. Not I heard thy speech and am afraid. I was afraid. Now he's not. And so he's talking to God saying, you're right, Lord. I shouldn't have done that. I responded out of fear instead of out of faith. But now I'm going to respond out of faith. And then he begins a plea for mercy in the same verse. He says, O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. Now, the years he's talking about there are the years when Judah is going to be in captivity. So during that time, he's saying, Lord, revive thy work. Send a revival even during the captivity. And look at the next part. In the midst of the years, make known, in wrath remember mercy. So in the midst of those years, yes, we're reaping your wrath, but please have mercy on us. Don't let your wrath go all the way to completely destroying us, completely removing the righteous out of Judah. Remember your work and revive the nation of Judah. That prayer quite possibly could be why we have Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these men during the Babylonian captivity. You have Ezra and Nehemiah, great men of God during the time of the Babylonian captivity. Very possibly could be because of Habakkuk's prayer that God would revive his work, and in the midst of that time of tribulation would still have mercy on the nation of Judah. And then Habakkuk gives a new perspective. The majority of chapter 3 is Habakkuk recounting the prophecy of Judah's destruction from a different perspective. So remember in chapter 2, The perspective is from God's perspective, saying, I'm bringing judgment, I'm going to destroy the nation. Now Habakkuk is looking at that same prophecy, and he's seeing it through different eyes. Let's start looking down at verse number 12. Thou didst march through the land in indignation. Thou didst thresh the heathen in anger. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people, even for salvation with thine anointed. Thou woundedst the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation unto the neck, Selah. And so instead of him focusing on the destruction, now he's focusing on the salvation. Thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people. And he sees now, from looking back, almost as if he's in the future looking back, and he sees what the work of God is going to produce. This time of trouble, this time of tribulation is going to produce the salvation of the people. And so he's praising God for that salvation. And then I just like the way that verse ends. Thou woundest the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering the foundation under the neck. He's saying you're going to cut the wicked's head off. That's what he's saying. It's very eloquent, very poetic, and he's basically just saying, God, you're going to chop their heads off. And he's rejoicing at Selah. Think about this. Habakkuk was not a very passive man, apparently. He kind of liked the violence that was going to come against the wicked. Verse 14 again is the same. Thou didst strike through with staves the head of his villages. So that's after he cut his head off, he's going to stick it on a sharp pole and put it up in front of the village and parade it around. So that's basically what Habakkuk is saying there. But it's a completely different perspective than what he had before. Now, instead of being in depression, now he is rejoicing because he sees how God is going to work things out in the end. He admitted that when he first heard of God's coming judgment against Judah, he was afraid. Verse number 16, when I heard, my belly trembled, my lips quivered at the voice. Rottenness entered into my bones, and I trembled in myself, that I might rest in the day of trouble. When he cometh up unto the people, he will invade them with his troops. So he's saying, when I first heard this, I was afraid. My belly trembled, my lips quivered, my bones felt like they were breaking. I had no strength in my body. I was afraid. But then, after all that, that's when he comes back to Habakkuk 3, 17 through 19. He eventually found himself rejoicing because he knew no matter what happened, God was still in control. Let's read it again. Although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olives shall fail, and the fields shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like hinds' feet, and he will make me to walk upon mine high places. And then he addresses it to the chief singer upon my stringed instruments, saying, I want you to make a song out of this entire prophecy. I'm rejoicing so much, I want to put this thing to song and put it to music, and I want to sing it to people. And I mean, just imagine how much of a change that is from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. He ended his book with this kind of strange comment about God making his feet like hinds' feet. And it's not really consistent with the rest of the book for him to use that type of a language. He doesn't use that type of, that's more the language of a shepherd. It's not the language of someone that's more of a warrior like the rest of Habakkuk's information is. And it's a language of a shepherd because he's quoting a shepherd. He's quoting David in Psalm 18 and verse number 30. And David has just, when he wrote Psalm 18, he had just come through a time of great trial. And he was looking back after going through that time of great trial, and this is what he wrote. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those that trust in him. For who is God save the Lord? Or who is a rock save our God? It is God that girdeth me with strength, that maketh my way perfect. He maketh my feet like hinds' feet, and setteth me upon my high places. So David concluded that psalm with saying, the Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. Do y'all know that song that has it? All right, yeah, so that song came from that psalm where David has gone through this terrible time in his life, and I looked it up at one point, but I can't remember exactly which trial it was, but he had many trials. It was after one of his trials that he wrote this psalm, and he said, "He maketh my feet like hinds' feet." And Habakkuk was thinking back on that psalm, and it brought comfort to him during his time of trouble. He's looking forward to a time of trouble. And now he's looking at the Psalm of David and says, just like David rejoiced, I'm going to rejoice before I even go into it. As we go through times of trouble also in our lives, all of us are going to face them. If you haven't, you must have amnesia. But all of us are going to go through times of trouble. We have already. We're going to face more in the future. That's just the nature of the Christian life. Yea, all they that will live for God shall suffer persecution. It's just part of the Christian walk. But we can have that same confidence that Habakkuk had, that God will triumph in the end. It's all working out for our good. All things work together for good, them that love God, who are called according to his purpose. Okay, so it's all working out for our good. And we can quote another Psalm of David where he wrote, "I shall not die, but live and declare the works of the Lord." So let's keep that in mind as we go through times of trial. Remember Habakkuk, remember his example, and remember that God is always in control. So, Pastor, I'll turn it back over to you.